I run a company called Shine. If you look at shinediversity.com, you can see the work that we do. It's training, consulting, policy writing, and curriculum writing. So we actually are going into businesses. We're going into corporations, we're going into nonprofits, we're going into faith-based communities and healthcare providers and giving over trainings both around gender and racial diversity inclusion. And we're giving people the tools to be able to really access and harness the gifts of diversity. And in the process of doing this, I really see that we're at this massive changing time period where all of a sudden communities that were ostracized, that nobody wanted to engage with, or that were actively being oppressed, all of a sudden people are taking an interest in our communities and they want the gifts of our communities.
YouTube is all about Pride Month. And so they have this like moving video about Stonewall, and it's just like a pride parade, and YouTube is saying how they just totally support Pride Month, and then like everyone else, they change their logo so it's some rainbow something of their symbol for, you know, whatever, so why they can, you know, their identity, their brand. So, but YouTube consistently demonetizes queer creators, meaning anytime gender, sexual diversity is talked about, queer creators run a risk of having YouTube automatically demonetize their videos so that they don't make money on their content.
Pride, we're at the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, which was a riot, right? And now all of a sudden, when you look at what pride parades look like, they look like corporations. Like Walmart has a float in the pride parade, and you're like, wait, is that really getting at the root of what we're doing? Because the reason we started Pride was about our rights and fighting for our equality, which we still need to be doing. It's not over. You look at the Trump administration, they're rolling back tons of rights that we have, both as queer people, as trans people, tons of rights around women's bodies, all of this, they're rolling all of this back, and our Pride parade should be reflecting that.
Burning Man is a good example where it was always the case. I mean, even like in the 90s when Bruce Sterling wrote a Wired magazine article about Burning Man, which is one of the bigger announcements of it, you know, he talks about how, and I think he talks about it in that essay, that like the counterculture is kind of like the petri dish for capital. It's a place to experiment and see what goes wrong, and oh, you let those guys go crazy and those become radicals and we got to deal with that. But like overall what you're doing is you're kind of saying the next level of consumer capital is going to be able to recognize what really works here, and because there's sort of a front edge, you can incorporate it.
We have to really pay attention to capitalism in the context of what's happening now with psychedelics, right? Because psychedelics have been this very underground experience because of lack of legalization. As soon as you start to legalize something, we see this with marijuana right now, then you enter into this capitalist market, and people that have actually been underground making their business out of this, oftentimes marginalized people, queer people, people of color, right? They've been doing this business for a long time. Suddenly it becomes legal, everyone jumps in on the game, and then you end up in a situation where people that have had this as their livelihood no longer can compete, especially when big business gets into something. So I'm very much trying to track if you know what's already happening in terms of pharmaceuticals, what's happening with big pharmaceuticals and who has control, and what's going to happen as we eventually legalize these medicines. Who's going to have control over these medicines? I think it's something that we all have to be paying attention to, being conscious of, and figuring out together how are we going to make sure that low-income people have access, make sure that this whole thing doesn't become dominated by corporations that don't actually have human interests at their core.